Hello, BookTube. All right, we're back for part, I think it's 4 of my 7.4K Q&A. And we're at the Peglar papers. Do you have any opinions on the Durrells, the books by Lawrence and Gerald Durrell? I do, yeah. Gerald Durrell wrote the Corfu trilogy, which I really like. And Lawrence Durrell wrote the Alexandria Quartet, which I think is great. Just great. Much better than his brother's book. Just fantastic. Well worth a read. Gunnar says, I'm glad you're not still bored of these Q&A videos. Oh, no, I love them. I love them. I'm not bored at all. I'm amazed you people still have questions, but I'm happy to answer them until the cows come home. And Gunnar has a number of questions. Number 1, Barbara Tuchman, yay or nay? Very strong yay. Well worth your time. Number 2, do you try to separate the art from the artist? Can you appreciate a good book written by a bad person? Yes. We all have to try. Absolutely have to try. You're not a social worker. You're not here to check the morals of anybody. So you have to do that. You have to try anyway. If you happen to know that an author is an odious person, you just have to separate that if you can. It's an extra incumbent on me to separate that because I might have to render a critical judgment on the book, and my readers don't know and they don't care if I have some sort of personal axe to grind against the author. So yeah, you have to separate it. And I might say the obverse is also true, right? I have, from everything that I know, I believe that Hank and John Green are really nice people, for instance, who write really terrible books. You have to separate it there too. You can't let any of that goodwill slop over into the book either. And lastly, would you consider doing follow-ups to your starter kit videos? I should. Yes, people want starter kit videos and follow-ups all the time. Going into a bit more depth, I really should. I really should do that. I will just add it to the list. A number of things have come up in this Q&A that I really should get to. Let's see here. Luke and Jennifer Higgins have a series of questions. Let's see. My young daughter, Emilia, yes, okay. Are you the ones who said you had, in the last Q&A, you were asking a question for your young daughter? You didn't tell me her name? She's not a possession of yours, you know. She's a person on her own. All right, Emilia, what is your question? Wondering who you consider to be the most powerful female superhero. Also, could she defeat any of the boy superheroes? That's easy. Very easy. That's Wonder Woman. The first and greatest superhero, female superhero of them all. If she's done right. Wonder Woman's original origin had her, she's a being created out of clay and infused by the gods on Olympus with superpowers. And those gods on Olympus gave her the strength of Hercules. They gave her the power of Zeus, the wisdom of Athena, the strength of Hercules, the power of flight, the power of invulnerability. She should be, if she is done the way she was originally conceived, then she's easily as powerful as Superman. Easily. And magic-based, so she should be able to beat Superman. Wonder Woman has no endemic weaknesses. She's a super powerful Amazonian warrior, far more powerful than any other Amazon. And she has magical accoutrements, magical weapons. Technically, she shouldn't be beatable by any other DC hero. And I'm happy to see writers, when they portray her that way. A lot of times writers don't portray her that way. A lot of times they make a very bad version of Wonder Woman, weak, dependent on her magical items like her bracelets or her lasso, or in the modern version her sword, when Wonder Woman shouldn't be that. According to her origin, she shouldn't be that, and sometimes she's portrayed that way really well, just as the ultimate heavy hitter for DC's superheroes. Also, in the comic books that I grew up with, prior to the Crisis on Infinite Earths, prior to DC Comics changing its comic characters, Supergirl, teenage girl from the planet Krypton, was immensely powerful, almost as powerful as Superman. That pre-Crisis Supergirl would also have been able to defeat easily any male superhero. Question number 2 is, do you enjoy the historical thrillers of Louis Balliard? I do, very much. And question number 3, I'm a huge fan of Sherlock Holmes. Which Conan Doyle biography do you think is the best? Daniel Stashower's book, Teller of Tales, I really liked. It's relatively modern. Doyle has, of course, had a million biographies, but I really liked that. I thought that one was really, really good. Jonathan Noel says, what are your thoughts on independent publishing through ebooks? Do you think it is a more viable option than traditional publishing? How far are writers likely to succeed in going down the indie route? I love what's happened to indie in the last 20 years. Just love it. It has grown so much, and more importantly, the stigma has fallen off it, to a large extent, Writers can be tremendously successful. The only thing that gets in the way, if you're an indie writer, the only thing that gets in the way of you being successful, if by successful I mean lots of readers and engaged readership and money, the only thing that will get in the way is you. Because the indie world is different from mainstream publishing. You have to lay out the initial costs yourself. Your publisher's not going to do that. You have to do that. So your book design, your editor, your copy reader, your tech person, all of that you have to oversee yourself. Every last bit of it. You have to become aware of what margins do and what gutters do and all that sort of stuff. You have to know all of that. And when you're done with that, you have to understand all about marketing. There are all sorts of tutorials that are free all over the place where you can help to learn, but you have to learn that stuff. If you just do what I'm certainly going to end up doing, make an ebook and then do nothing with it, well, then nothing will happen to it. You have to learn all of that. But if you do, then the sky's the limit for what you can amass an enormously loyal audience, and you can make a very good amount of money, and you can easily support yourself. But you have to do all of that ancillary stuff. And that's both a drawback and a strength, because once upon a time, your publisher would do all of that stuff, but there were all sorts of elements involved in you getting that far. You could be as willing as you want to do that, and you wouldn't have made a difference because the publisher was going to do that, and it would all came down to whether or not they were going to notice you. Does some harried assistant editor at a publisher grab 10 books out of the slush pile, and yours happens to be the first one they open when they have a really good lunch, and the lunch is sitting really well with them, so they think, this person I'm going to call back? Because let's not have any illusions, right? If your book is in a slush pile of one of those assistant editors with 100 other books, probably 80 of those books are every bit as worthwhile as your book. It comes down to happenstance at publishing houses as to who will be picked. Who do you know? Who have you dropped a word with? Who'd you go to school with? Who were you at McDowell with? Who have you slept with? All sorts of things that don't have anything to do with the quality of your book. Whereas, if you go indie, you're not the victim of any of that crap. You're not the victim of any of it. You have e-distribution routes. You can research them. You have publication schemes, sales, all that sort of stuff. You can research that. You have audience outreach efforts of all kinds. You can research that. You can determine what your book looks like. You get a much higher cut of the proceeds. Now, it's a much, much better way to do things. No wonder traditional bookstores who are hand in glove with traditional publishers don't let indie books into their stores. But the top 200 best-selling indie book authors don't need their books to be in stores. Why would they? And as a result, I might add, pandemic proof. they were there before there was there and ready for them. They're pandemic proof, whereas their mainstream author brethren who look down on them are seriously hurting. The indie route is the way to go. Absolutely the way to go. Once in a blue moon, you'll be some mumbling, floppy-haired writer of contemporary fiction who goes to Brooklyn and knows all the right people, hangs out at all the right events, calls all the worst people in the world friends and allies so that you can leverage yourself to get there. And okay, then you will have a standard mechanical traditional publishing career, but you don't need that. And I would argue that path almost always corrupts and compromises the people who choose to walk it. So better by far to go indie. What are you eating? Frida? What are you eating? Here, come. I don't know what that is, but I want you to stop. Do you want to see your fans? Since you're making a fuss. You were eating something. We reached 7.4K. When I had no subscribers, I had different dogs. She only met one of those dogs. She met my pointer, and she doesn't remember Malin. She was too young when Malin died. I found out the other day I directly found out that she doesn't remember Malin, and she never met Lucy. So she's been ruling the roost alone as far as she's concerned. Let's see here. Okay, so Jonathan Noel, the indie route, I wholeheartedly thumbs up. It's the route I will take when I eventually get off my duff and do it. Benjamin Revol says, I'm watching from France. I heard you express some doubts about the value of Proust, Balzac, and Flaubert. No doubts. No, I just don't like these authors as much as other people do. I recognize their worth. They haven't done it. They haven't worked their magic on me. Balzac more than Flaubert or Proust. What don't you like about them? There's nothing I don't like about them. Are there other French authors that you enjoy? Well, Alexandre Dumas, of course, but I don't think the French claim him. Wilson Shugart. another well-known troublemaker, asks, of Superboy and the Three Pretenders, who would win a contest of cunning, charm, skills, and ability? Well, that would be Kal-El, Clark Kent, when he was a teenager. If you read any of those really old adventures, which you won't from DC Comics anytime soon, but if you read any of those adventures, you realize that although he has the unlimited powers of a god, that original Superboy, Clark Kent, when he was a teenager, mostly does get out of his jams with cunning, with his brain. That was also the rule with the Superman comics, adult Superman at the time, is that he should be the smartest hero, not just, he shouldn't just be winning because he can punch things. The second question, thoughts on John McGarren? Oh, but you spelled thoughts, Thots. I want to be careful there. in the anti-SJW crowd, in the men's rights crowd, THOT isn't a funny variation on the spelling of thought. It stands for that harlot over there, and it has a very specific meaning that you don't want to be throwing around if you don't know it. But I like John McGarren. I don't love him. He's very Jamesian, but I like him. And also, from the long list, which would you like to see take the Booker? Or really, which after the Mirror and the Light? Well, the thing that I'd really like to win the Booker is the printout that I'm going to do of these 7.4K Q&A questions. I'm going to print out these questions, not the answers, just the questions. And I'm figuring it has a good chance. It's on the long list already. Let's see here. Where are we here? The rad pad is acting up. I don't think it expected so many questions. Alan Braswell says, do you think it's important to read forwards or introductions before you begin reading the first chapter, or are there any considerations in which one can just skip a forward or introduction to the book? This is a subject I had to deal with a lot when I taught. But the answer is how accessible the book is to you. If it's a book written in the last 100 years in your native language, then, you know, unless it's, you know, Finnegan's Wake or something like that, you might want to jump right into it. I always advise, if not introduction or a preface, then Wikipedia. I always advise that the reader of a new work get a little bit of ground under their feet before they launch onto it. Not under the assumption that the original work can't stand on its own. It can. But time passes, and not every reader is as up on the informing factors as every other reader. It helps, I think, to just sort of ground yourself a little on the book, no matter what it is, unless it's totally self-evident. You don't need any help to read Sherlock Holmes. You don't need any help to read Dracula or anything like that. But if, for instance, you were going into what's a good example? Well, Balzac, we just mentioned it. Père Goriot. If you're going to read that, okay, that's a 200-year-old work in a different language from a different fiction tradition. Excuse me. You might, in that circumstance, want to read a paragraph about it on Wikipedia, or a nice general introduction. Although even in English, that will work on you without any. So it all depends on the strangeness of the book. Doom Antidote asks, in its Daily Penguin video, you mentioned that Middlemarch would be one of the top 10 novels written in English. What would you say some of the other novels that would be on that list? The whole question these days is this going to be followed by 2 solid hours of sneezing? So that by the end I've got a spray of blood coming out, I can't think anymore, I've got cold sweat all over me. Or is it just a normal couple of sneezes? We're going to go with the latter and hope for the best. Yeah, I had a lot of questions about that. I made a mistake of saying the top 10 there, and that had everybody wanting to know what they would be. I will make a video on that top 10. The Francophile Reader says, do you like satire? Do, very much so, yes. I don't think I've ever heard you talk about satire on your channel, although I couldn't possibly watch all of your videos, so you may have talked about it in a satire before and I missed it. Why can't you watch all of my videos? Something better to do? Hanging around with the cool booktubers? If you like satire, what satires have you enjoyed? Well, you've heard me talk about satires of Horace, I'm sure. But also Alexander Pope, John Dryden. I could do it again. I could do a top 10 list of satires that I like, and they go right down to the present. They go right down to the 20th century. Some of the satires on, for instance, the Nixon administration are choice. Winifred Lee, well-known troublemaker. Wants to know, let's see here. Congratulations, Frida. Pass these questions along to Smelly Steve for me. How dare you? How dare you? I'll have you know that for the 7.3K Q&A, I had a bath. All right? Just you remember, eyes on the prize. I'm the cute one. Anyway, what are these questions? Number one, do you enjoy Ozu's films? Do you think they are worth the trouble? They most certainly are not. They are pretentious twaddle. Question number two, which country in the world cinema do you think makes the most beautiful films? Well, that would be the United States of America. Any directors or films in particular you have loved in your 28 years? Okay, we're talking 6 syllables here. Okay, USA, Michael Bay. Okay, there you go. Thomas RP says, what are your thoughts on Lee Child's brother, Andrew Child, co-writing the future Jack Reacher novels until Andrew takes over completely? I love it. I think it's a great idea. Why not, right? I mean, no one considers the Jack Reacher novels to be literature, high literature. They're very enjoyable, but why not have the brother take over? Also, what do you think of Andrew Grant's work so far, and can he fill the shoes of his big brother? I don't think there'll be a distinguishable difference between the two books. Also, could you show us that Conan book on your right, please? Oh, that black book right there is right next to Shakespeare, is the Complete Conan, which has a little bit of a tangled history here because I saw the hardcover version of that behind Jason Harrigan in one of his very earliest videos. And I screamed out like a little child in a candy shop, me wanty. And I had no idea that he'd be so generous as to box it up and send it to me. And he did. And I loved it. And I think I hauled it on this channel and thought it was just fantastic. What a fantastic, generous gesture. And then one of you, years later, or a year later, found the trade paperback of the same book. And they found it at a library sale for like nothing with a whole bunch of other books, sent me a whole box, and that was one of the things in there. I put the paperback on the shelf because I mean to give the hardcover to Mark Richardson at Richardson Reads, but a plague descended and I couldn't do it. So I figured that's the one case of regifting that Jason wouldn't mind, is if I gave it to Mark, because the three of us are kind of... but I haven't done it yet. I have the one paperback copy here. But I haven't done it. I haven't got rid of I haven't regifted the hardcover yet. Let's see here. Lee In says, how would you say the Royal Shakespeare Company's Shakespeare compares to the Riverside Shakespeare? Well, the Riverside Shakespeare, the brown hardcover Riverside Shakespeare, is renowned as one of the best Shakespeare editions ever done. But this has been my constant companion for about a week now. I know it inside and out now, and I rank it very highly. So I wouldn't say that it beats the Riverside, but it's really, really good. It's really, really good. One of you sent it to me, and I'm very grateful. Let's see here. John Garganarakis says, did you get a chance to read Dave Rubin's book? And if so, what were your thoughts? This is Dave Rubin's latest book, Burn This Book. I did read it, and it is absolutely horrible. Absolutely horrible. It exists purely as an unrestrained ego trip, like most of what this kid has done for the last 5 years. Just an unrestrained ego trip. He's built an ego bubble in which he can straight-facedly compare himself to David Hume, and no one around him will mock him. It takes his ex-friends, all the people that he's alienated, to hear that and mock him from outside his bubble, but he is safely ensconced in his bubble. So to the extent where he can be blatantly insulted to his face and just stay inside his bubble and just go, oh really? Yeah. But this book exists for that purpose. It exists for him to name drop a million different so-called intellectuals and a million legitimate intellectuals, mish them all together, and the whole purpose of mushing them all together like that is that he gets to be one of them. It's just revolting, a revoltingly egotistical exercise. Paper Mache says, you once told a story about traveling in Central Africa where you were accosted by a group of chimps, I think, and that you threatened to set your dogs on your guide if he shot the chimps. I don't know that I had told that story on this channel. It was close enough to that. I was in Cameroon, and I was out with my dogs and a bunch of stray dogs and a guide and a couple of friends, and the guy we spotted some chimpanzees in the distance, through the foliage in the distance. They weren't bothering us at all. I don't think they even knew we were there. And the guide unlimbered his rifle because he thought he'd just shoot one for the fun of it. He was laughing. And that's murder. I told him, don't you dare. And I don't know that I threatened to set my dogs on him, but they knew when I wasn't happy with somebody. And that was, there weren't enough rounds in his gun to kill them all. He would have been ripped to shreds. So he didn't. Besides, I was paying, so he deferred. But what is the question here? Was it always your principle when on their patch not to defend yourself from wild animals if it meant harming them in any way? Or was it just that gut reaction in that particular instance? Well, if that's the story that you're thinking of, I didn't think I told that story on this channel. If that's the story you're thinking of, it was just a visceral reaction. It would have been simple murder. The chimps weren't doing anything to anybody. I can't say that I have always completely, Mother Teresa in passivity accepted the behavior of animals when I was on their patch. If they were aggressive and wanted to kill me, I did my best to interfere with their plans many, many times. But other than that, only a couple of stories where it was egregious. My baboon story is one of those stories where it was egregious and it was unusual. Most of the time, my dogs and I would just encounter an animal or a group of animals, and usually the animal wanted nothing to do with us at all and would just take off. And if they didn't, it's helpful to have a large pack of dogs who are at your beck and call. Let's see here. JC says, have you ever thought of an opposite to your Chunkster video about novellas? Ooh, that's a good idea. For those times when someone has just finished, I don't know, Gulag Archipelago and needs to be told to read something like William Maxwell's So Long, See You Tomorrow. Oh, William Maxwell. Or Louis Auchincloss, another one that were nice, respectable, thin palate cleansers. Well, that's a good idea. Thin books. That's a good idea. I'll put it on the list. I'm getting lots of ideas from this Q&A. Lollipoops says, hey, you seem to have such a special connection with dogs. Who was your first pet? I don't know how you would translate her name. It was one dog a long, long time ago. And since then, yeah, I've had a special connection with dogs. Very much. Very special. Peter Pablo says, do you watch YouTube videos on 2x speed? No, I don't. I've never understood how to do that. I haven't. YouTube or Voxer messages. I've never understood how to feel like I wasn't being rude, even though the person doesn't know that I'm doing it. It still feels like I'm in conversation with somebody, I'm doing this. Like, speed it up. And that's intolerably rude. Just literally intolerably rude. If I'm in a conversation with somebody and they do that, I stop talking literally in the middle of a word, pay my share of the bill, get up from the table and walk out. Hey, where are you going? Hey, what's going on? No words, no explanations, just pay my share of the bill, get up and walk out. If it's on, on a dog walk or it's on the sidewalk or something and someone starts doing this, stop literally on the syllable that my mouth is saying at the moment and just walk away. Hey, where are you going? Hey, come on, where are you going? No explanation, just it's intolerably rude to do. And it feels like doing that, even though the person can't see me do it. Besides, I'm losing something if I do that. I'm losing the cadence of the person who's speaking, which is part of why I'm not watching BookTube videos for their informational content. Okay, I'm not watching BookTube for their informational content. I'm watching because I consider these people friends. I want to hear their cadences. I want to hear how they do it. So I don't ever increase the speed. I don't do that. Isaiah Armstrong has a number of questions. How are we doing for time? All right, we'll do Isaiah's questions. Number one, my favorite author is Ray Bradbury. You could certainly do a lot worse, couldn't you? Are there any sci-fi authors whose style is similar to his? That reminds me of a long time ago. I was working at a retail bookstore, and Barnes & Noble, and it had a sort of internally produced newsletter for science fiction that was just a pamphlet, the free pamphlet that was handed out in the science fiction section. We'd get about 100 of them a month, and you just put them in a container in the science fiction section. And I never paid any attention to it at all. I didn't think one way or another. And then one day I happened to read one. They were in my section. I was the whole first floor of the store, so I was doing science fiction, and I happened to read one of these things, and it was just awful. It was riddled with mistakes, riddled with typos, embarrassingly bad prose, and it had a list of authors and authors you could suggest who are like them. And when we got to Ray Bradbury, it said no one compares to Ray Bradbury. And I thought, what idiot wrote this? How about all the people Ray Bradbury ripped off? They don't compare to him. How about all the people who ripped off him? They don't compare to him. Yeah, there are plenty of people who do. You say that reminded me because it was Ray Bradbury. But I would suggest M. John Harrison. If you haven't read M. John Harrison, I'd strongly suggest him to start with. There are plenty of other names. Let's see here. Oh God, the tripod fell, and that made me lose my place. Okay, Isaiah Armstrong. All right. What do you like about Thomas Mann's style of writing? Well, lots of things, but mainly that he doesn't talk down to me. He's like George Eliot in that he doesn't condescend to his readers. He doesn't think he's telling stories to children, and that is so endemic in fiction. That is so widespread, and always has been. That I can't stand it when I see it, and I'm very much refreshed when I don't. So, and his third question, and we'll finish up with this one. How do you argue with people who say Finnegan's Wake is a masterpiece, especially if they are one of the few who claim they can read it, let alone understand it? Well, I try not to argue with those people. If they love it, that's fine. If they think that they read it and they think it's great, that's fine. I'm not going to argue with that at all. If they go beyond that, and occasionally one of them has, and tell me that, if you don't think it's a masterpiece, there's something wrong with you, well, you don't want to do that. You especially don't want to do that with me, and you especially don't want to do that with me in front of an audience, because I can demonstrate the flaws in the thing. I can demonstrate what a piece of crap it is. I'm perfectly happy to let you love it and let the literary world love it, but don't tell me that I should love it too. Don't tell me it's a masterpiece. Anyway, I try not to argue with such people. We're going to wrap this up, though. We've gone on long enough. I'm going to settle the tripod here, and we'll come back. So I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.